This is the moment of truth. I've been gone out of the country for about 17 days. I am here at my worm bin. The top layer is my baby cocoon, baby worm bin. And let's have a look. Oof, this material is a bit dry. I see lots of worms in it. That's good. I also see that they started to eat through the cardboard, or it's been disintegrated, which is not a problem. I have my real big working worm bin below. So I am going to give this material a sift. It's a bit on the dry side, which is okay. It's good to sift. And then I'm going to add these worms to my existing worm bin, and I'll be back shortly. I have my sifting pan GP2-112. That is a fine grit. It is not going to leave too many cocoons through. And so what I am going to be left with is pure vermicompost at the end. Let's put a scoop in here. So it is catching all the non-processed material, and what I will be left with is nice and pure vermicompost. I'll be back in a bit. I'm finished sifting the top drawer over here of my worm bin. I got the completed pure compost right here. This is nice and beautiful, ready to be used on my plants, my vegetable garden. And what I am left with is the not so fine composts with all my baby worms that hatched from my cocoons, and some of the cardboard left over where the worms are hiding in. So I will be using that as I build the new layer of my worm farm. I'll be back in a bit. I placed all my pure vermicompost in one of these buckets. I'm going to cover it with a lid that had some holes in it. And I am about to uncover my worm bin, my working worm bin. I have been out of the country for 17 days, and if you remember my last video on what to do, what not to do when going out of the country, I told you not to explore, not to experiment, not to do anything that you had previously not done. And if you remember, I added chicken compost straight out of my chicken coop into my worm bin, and that was a dumb thing to do because my worms did revolt, they did hide out, and they did crawl out, and some of them flat out died. But I was home for a couple of days, so I was able to fix those conditions. This material was quite a bit compacted in my working worm bin. I am finding a tremendous amount of worms. So I guess they survived while I was gone for 17 days and were left uninterrupted. I am also finding quite a bit of cocoons, so they are healthy and happy. But I do need to sift this material and provide them with quite a bit of new food. So I will go ahead and do that, and I'll be back in a minute. I have lined the top layer of my bin with cardboard, and I've covered it with newspaper, and I've made it all damp, kind of papier-mâché it all in, so I don't have really much of any holes where worms could escape. I'm going to use this layer as a layer for my cocoons and my baby worms. The next step is I'm going to add shredded cardboard. This bin is primarily going to be shredded newspaper, shredded cardboard, and I am going to add some shredded leaves to this and make it completely moist. And so I'll be right back. I've added shredded leaves off my tree. I've mixed it all in. I've also added some grass from my mealworm farm only because this will be easy to decompose and easy to digest, and maybe add a little bit of grit for my cocoons, my red wiggler cocoons that I will be putting in here. Before I add my cocoons, I am going to drench this in water. Make it all nice and soaking wet. I'm going to let this sit for a little while before I add my red wiggler cocoons to it, and give this a minute to start building some microbes. I'm also going to add a little bit of my compost from my working worm bin and get this going. I've also mixed in just a small bucket container about this big of composting chicken manure, and so I'm going to let all of this marinate. And as you see in the center, it's a little bit wet, and that's okay. It's going to dry up. I'm not worried about it. I am, however, going to add some of my cocoons that I've picked from my working bin. I'm going to add them more on the side over here so they're not quite drenched in the soaking wet cardboard area. But the cocoons do like a little bit of a more moist environment, so I'm not worried about them doing well. They're over here. The water moisture is collecting more in the middle, and so they can start developing and hopefully give me loads of baby worms. Of course, I'm going to keep you posted on this worm bin, so keep watching. I'll post an update in a week or so. I'm going to cover this with cardboard, and that's all I'm going to do to it.